Welcome everybody to the June reading series presented by the Sundress Academy for the Arts. If you don't know, Sundress Academy for the Arts, or SAFTA, is a writer's residency and arts collective that hosts workshops, retreats, and residencies for writers in all genres, including poetry, fiction, nonfiction, journalism, academic writing, playwriting, and more. And you can find out more at the website. That's sundressacademyforthearts.com. And we want to give a big thank you to the Tennessee Arts Commission for the grant that made it possible for us to pay our readers tonight. My name is Stacy Estep. I'm the reading series coordinator, and I'm going to introduce Arlen, who is our community outreach director, and she's going to tell us about our community partner for the month. Arlen?
Thank you. Can you all hear me? Give me a thumbs up. All right, I'm going to share a photo. Okay, can you all see that? So my name is Arlen, and I'm the Community Outreach Director for SAFTA. Each month, we partner with another local nonprofit to raise awareness of the work they're doing in Knoxville and how folks can help. In the chat box, there's links that you can find out more about the organization and a direct link to donate. Brandy wasn't able to make it, but I've got some information with you to share about the Knoxville Black Mamas Bailout, which is a liberation organization that grew from Southerners on new ground and the National Bailout, thanks largely to the work of Mary Hooks. The Knoxville Black Mamas Bailout disrupts the cash bail system through a practice of bailing Black mothers and caregivers from the Roger D. Wilson detention facility, because we know the breakdown on families caused by putting Black women in cages, most of whom who have not even been convicted of a crime, but are unable to pay bail. The Knoxville Black Mamas Bailout also works to dissolve barriers of incarceration that impact these women and their families. These practices include paying cash bonds. Some of the women have had bonds as high as $350,000. On Juneteenth, the crew of the Knoxville Black Mamas Bailout was able to put down $100 on 24 Mamas prison commissaries. I'll share a picture of that. This is just a picture of some of their crew. The crew is volunteer-led of many freed mamas, activists, and artists of different identities and realities who believe in a commitment to abolition, resist the fallacy of prison reform, and listen to the mamas who mediate between the system and its working parts on behalf of the women and caregivers. But they don't stop at just paying bonds and bail. They seek resources and collaborate with Black mamas to help them adjust once they are out of the detention facilities and back with their families by providing transportation, food distribution, and resources to obtain health care and work. That's just a small snapshot, but for some folks who want to show some love, I've got one more photo for you. So for the 4th of July, the Black Mamas Bailout has a fundraiser with the goal of $1,000 to help a local Black mama obtain new legal services. It's only been up since yesterday, and they've already raised $872. We could easily help them meet their goal if everyone tonight considered donating. To donate, you can Venmo Appalachian Community Fund, and you can use the US flag emoji to support the Black mama. Thank you for listening, and consider donating tonight.
Thank you, Arlen. All right, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first reader, Kendra DeColo is the author of 3 poetry collections: I Am Not Trying to Hide My Hungers from the World, My Dinner with Ron Jeremy, and Thieves in the Afterlife, selected by Yusef Komunyakaa for the 2013 Saturnalia Books Poetry Prize. She's also the author of Low Budget Movie, written with Tyler Mills. She's received awards and fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts, MacDowell, the Bread Loaf Writers Conference, the Millay Colony, and has performed at the Newport Folk Festival. She lives in Nashville, Tennessee. Please welcome Kendra.
Hi, thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Erin and Gray and the whole Sundress Academy for having this amazing series. I'm so honored to be part of it. I live in Nashville, so I'm really just a few hours away. Thank you, Arlen, for that amazing presentation. I'm really honored to be connected to that cause tonight. And thank you so much for having that be part of this reading. So I'm really honored to be reading with this lineup tonight. I'm really excited. I'm going to be reading a few poems from my new collection that just came out. It's called I'm Not Trying to Hide My Hungers from the World. And I like to show the cover because it's a naked lady with a Superman cape. And most of the poems are about childbirth and motherhood. And I like to frame it as kind of heroic work, because I think often in the literary world, people kind of dismiss it or feel like it's boring. And so I feel like my enjoyment is finding ways to make motherhood subversive, because it is, and hardcore. So the first poem I'm going to read is called I Pump Milk Like a Boss. I pump milk on the side of the road where the grass is biblical green, as a first cousin to the cow, her pink and swollen tits immaculate as the plumbing of a church organ sending up calls to God, brassy mesh of notes fermented and dank as kush. I pump milk with my bare hands into a bar's bathroom sink, above which is a mirror where someone scrawled, I love cricket pussy, and below that, everyone deserves to be loved. I look at myself under the fingered smudge, the bodily fluids spattered like haikus, and I pump as if my milk is propaganda, fingers bowing across my chest like a pawn shop violin, milky graffiti tagging the spit-clogged drain. I pump like I'm writing my name in blood, which turns to the milk my child sucks dry, which she turns into blood. I pump like I have a tattoo on my pedenda that says Aerosmith backwards. I pump as if my hands have teeth, one combat boot hitched up on the toilet seat, each hiss of milk chanting like a choir, yes, bitch, yes. Yes, bitch, yes. My tits bitten and salt-veined, as when my baby took her first gulp of air, humming from the engorged crevasse of me like a herd of wildebeest, as if the hive of me could have burst. The infrared honey, the glop glop of afterbirth dripping down my left leg, spittle and amen, amniotic residue fluorescent with prayer. Do men lactate is a popular Google search, and I wonder what would happen if they could. Our presidents lifting their offspring to their breasts in the deep pockets of night, listening to the dribble of milk sipped from the pulpit of their bodies. Tonight, my breast became so engorged, I said I'd pay someone to suck my tits, half joking, but a woman who heard me followed me to the bathroom, read me a sex poem while I pumped my milk, leaning away from the need in her voice, and the milk came slow, and I pumped and I waited for her to finish, and a streetlight scribbled in the parking lot. And I know there's a price we pay for loneliness and a price we pay to forget it. And so I dedicate my libido to my younger self. And this is how I want to live. Milk stained, a little bit emptied, a little bit in love with the abundance of my body. My milk pale yellow with a layer of cream, which I'll save long after it's turned, praising its curdled glow. Every time I open the fridge, as if its presence is enough to keep me safe, as if it's enough to make me invincible. And that was one of the first poems I wrote after having my daughter, after giving birth. And I had kind of like a wild AWP, that writers conference. That's kind of terrible and kind of fun. I went there when she was a year old and I was like, I'm going out. And I'm like, oh shit, my tits are full of milk. I have to do something. And so it kind of, the poem wrote itself. The next poem is called I Write Poems About Motherhood. And I like to preface this saying that this was written in response to an editor who kind of infamously never published poems about motherhood, and then had the gall to go on Twitter and say, hey, why don't people submit poems about motherhood anymore? And we're like, because you're not publishing them. And that can go for so many kinds of themes that feel like they're shut out from literary worlds. So I wrote this poem in response. I write poems about motherhood. Tonight, I can write the most motherly lines. For example, it's true, my asshole will never be the same after giving birth. Not its shape, but its soul. Small wick of shadow I once called home and dream. Tonight, I can write how it burned like a votive. The whole inverted star, a series of grievances from which another self grew. Seance and seam, split off to live parallel lives like vaporish twins. I can write that I gave birth and died and came back to life, and my asshole will never be the same. It wore a haunted look those first few weeks, claimed it needed to take fresh airs in the country, wore aggressively Victorian clothes, and strutted around naming geodes like a gentleman farmer. Shut up, asshole, I admonished. Tonight I write my daughter emerged and split me into two selves. It didn't hurt the way they said it would. I rocked on my knees, singing a song like hurtling my voice off a cliff. My husband's hand disappeared into mine, and for a moment I left this world, a hem of blood between us. I broke onto the shore of a fixed note. I helixed and drank the urine of starved apparitions to keep me afloat, slapped the shit out of my reflection, squatted and squeezed a rocky planet out from the blue horizon, like a ship bifurcating a labial sky. But my asshole, to whom I must now give credit where credit is due, taught me how to anchor to the earth, locate the hot center, which I always knew was there, but never saw shining in my sacrum like Orion's belt, when they stitched me shut in a ragged, casual way, even though I wished to stay open a little longer, unhinged and full of silences. Tonight I can write, I'd give birth a million times over and not tell anyone about it if I could feel that kind of way again. One hollowed self open wide, enough to swallow my own body and then spit it back out onto the earth. Next, I'm going to, thank you. The next poem I'm going to read is, it feels like I shouldn't have to read this anymore. It's about President number 45. But you know, I never want to forget what happened during that administration. I don't want our country to forget. And so I continue to read this poem in hopes that, you know, in hopes that things get better. And they're already getting better, I hope. It's called, I'd like to tell the president to eat a dick in a non-homophobic way. I would like for him to really taste the dick, savor it like a last meal, note the way it has or hasn't recently been washed, the residue of baby powder and sweat sheathed at the base like a foamy negligee. I'd like for him to choke on the dick if that's what he's into and it's been talked about beforehand. I'd like for him to really get to know the dick, how it curves to the left and bends towards justice, how it is sweet and bitter under the foreskin, how it is unashamed of its history and knows where it's going. And while we're on the subject, I'd like for Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell to eat a bag of dicks too, casual Lunchable style dicks, a confetti of frosting covered dicks exploding in their taste buds like a Saturday morning balloon drop. I'd like to ask the president to eat so many dicks that he vows to eat more pussy, which has vitamins and minerals and the secrets to success, until he feels clean, until he feels as close to the face of God as a man can get, until he loves dick and pussy so much he shakes like a man redeemed in a church revival tent, understanding that first there was the word, and the word was let them eat dicks, and the word was good. Lord, let him eat a dick that knows it will one day die, a dick that expects nothing in return, humble dick, tired dick, the dick he must eat, the one he has feared his whole damn life, the dick that might fill the endless void inside. I get so angry thinking about that person. So I like to think of that poem as a hex. I hope, I saw there was maybe a child who was watching with their caregiver. I hope that, yeah, it's clear by now this would be rated R for adult language. The next poem is I used to have an epigraph for it by Aracelis Girmay. It's a beautiful line from her book, The Black Maria, saying that someone who doesn't love you cannot name you right. And I think about the ways that we name our bodies and how that can be an act of love or an act of betrayal. Thinking about how I never say the word cunt. even though it fits neatly on the tongue, like a penny or compressed tab of Diet Coke, even though it's the kryptonite of syphilitic dictators, but never fiendish poets or burnt out actors, calloused invective of the heart, stammering like a fleet of frat boys' loafered hooves, thinking of Richard Burton, who described Elizabeth Taylor's asshole with such tenderness, as if it were an injured fawn, tended to it when it became infected, enchanted by its geography and hymns, and learned to call it by its 1,000 balmy names, but never once uttered a syllable about her immaculate cunt, as in Dream Thief, spell to protect what I love, as in tick I will acquire when I'm old and tired of holding the demons in. I'll stutter cunt, cunt, cunt on the bright carriage of my unraveling, the word a sip, infusion, safety valve, a reckoning. Palm of nickels clicked into a payphone, mouth full of smoke blistering the air. I'll just read 2 more poems. This next one, I don't think I need to explain anything. It's called #TeamRat. So it kind of refers back to those awesome, pizza rat memes from a few years ago and my love for them. Team Rat. God bless the back issues of Vanity Fair and Good Housekeeping, whose pages I gloss in the dentist waiting room, like Playboy magazines for chocolate cake recipes that include mayonnaise, and a fashion shoot where the model levitates in the aurora ovum of a feeling I can't describe, but know like autumn leaves throbbing in a strip mall sound system. God bless the retired nurse sitting across from me in her floral bomber, who types on her phone with the sound on so I can hear each letter tingle under her index like an otter clacking clamshells between its paws. God bless the otter and its abundance of memes, mirroring 21st century desperation for something decent to flash across our screens, even if it's a fraudulent video of a dog rescuing a goat or a pig overturning a turtle. And maybe I'm projecting, but I prefer the rat dragging its festering purse of pizza down subway steps, like Fred Astaire gliding on gilded hooves. I prefer the possum and its febrile coat of scab and moonshine, how it looks mid-shriek in every picture, baring teeth, like it might shred the hand that tries to rescue her but doesn't. And I've read that if you find a possum killed by a car, you should look inside the womb. Reach your hands into the gummy guts, the way I reached into my own darkness to touch my baby as she emerged, marveling at the animal in me that would have torn myself open. I say God bless anyone willing to kneel beside a body and conjure resurrection from the muck of starlessness and decay, the tingle of tiny breaths piercing through the night, the way my daughter seemed to sing her name as she entered this world, announcing herself again and again. Last poem. I'm not trying to hide my hungers from the world anymore. Not trying to wipe the smears of gold from my chin. Not trying to erase the decadence of seeds and profanity of Greece. Not trying to pretend I don't open my mouth around the zoptic pearls of rain in the middle of the night, or that I don't love the moment right before sleep when I'm most tender and translucent, my bladder half filled, knowing I'll have to get up and pee, knowing my daughter will wake up before I'm ready, the way I became aware of her on a climb through the mountains, a heaviness in my limbs, a gentle premonition as I walked later to the Rite Aid, and I knew in my hands, and I knew in my mouth, and I knew in the way my body pulled me forward as I wept with joy, but also grief, that a part of my life was ending. And isn't it good to know when life is about to swallow you whole, take you in its arms and say, live, bitch, live, and you believe it. And this is how I will carry her from her crib and open the curtains part way, not ready to let the world in. The trails of smoke and exhaust winter blue as Cat Stevens' monobone jackum spinning on the Crosley that opens like an old suitcase when my daughter stands on a chair, lifting the stylus from its perch, guiding it to the starry chatter that hisses between songs, wondering what will play next. Thank you.
Thank you, Kendra. Beautiful work. Thank you so much. All right, our next reader is Danny Putney, a queer, non-binary, mixed-race, Filipinx, and neurodivergent writer originally from Sacramento, California. Their poems appear in outlets such as Empty Mirror, Ghost City Review, Glass, a journal of poetry, Juke Joint Magazine, and Tramset, among others, while their personal essays can be found in journals such as Cold Mountain Review and Glassworks Magazine, among others. They received their MFA in creative writing from Mississippi University for Women and are presently an English PhD student at Oklahoma State University. While not always physically there, they permanently reside in the middle of the Nevada desert. Please welcome Danny Putney.
Kumusta kayo, everybody? As Stacy said, Danny here. I also pronounce my name Danny too. That's more of the Cebuano pronunciation. I just like to say that because my second project that I'm working on right now is a reclamation of my Visayan heritage in the Philippines. It's called Mix Mix, which is actually the English translation of the term halo halo, which is this really amazing Philippine dessert. You should look it up. It's really hard to describe in such short details, but it's a very great dessert. But yeah, I'm going to read a few poems tonight. The first three, to give you a brief roadmap, because I'm a very planned person like that, are from my debut collection, which came out with OK Donkey Press last month. It's called Salamat sa Intersectionality. And if you guys don't know OK Donkey Press, they're amazing. And also they have a wonderful journal too, just OK Donkey. And they're amazing people, beautiful souls, and you guys should submit your poems or flash fiction if you have them. I love them to death, and I'm so grateful that I got my first book with them. And if you look at it, this is like a little cowboy becoming a snake, and that's actually me. And it's great because the cover artist, she really like interviewed me, like she really grilled me for a second about like all of these details of my life and in my book, and then she came up with these beautiful artwork. So thank you so much to OK Donkey Press. But before I start getting into the weeds too much and provide too much context, because that is what I want to do all the time, I'm going to get started. The first poem I'm reading is about my half-home state, Nevada, which I've lived in about 12-ish years of my life now. But specifically, this is a contemporary sonnet that I wrote in response to William Brewer's I Know You're Kind, which is this really lovely book about West Virginia and the opioid crisis there. But I hadn't really written a poem about Nevada that was simultaneously grotesque and beautiful at the same time. And I think that William Brewer in that collection does a lot of that. So I wrote this poem about Mustang euthanasia, because if you guys know or don't know, Mustangs are basically an invasive species in Nevada. We have the highest number of wild horses. And it's sad because they're way too overpopulated. They're not only destroying the environment, especially in northern Nevada, but they don't have anywhere to live. They don't have food. They don't have water. So they end up having to be euthanized by the Bureau of Land Management. And that's a really questionable practice. But I wrote this poem after that entire like complicated history of Nevada. So I'm just gonna read the poem now. Nevada. A Mustang was shot again, northward where the desert glows, mountain dreams flowing along the highway. Guts decorate a thirsty earth, flies battling, it's my flesh, mine. If a horse is euthanized, piled into a heap of horses, does the energy recycle itself? Blood can't beget nothingness, can't recreate a wasteland of diseased sand and Bureau of Land Management conquerors whose bullets carry the end. Sagebrush grows where bones sink. It feels funny because like I had this whole explanation of it and it's like only 14 lines of poem, but then again, that's kind of my style, right? This next poem is in the second section of my book. It's about being a little slut, honestly, and exploring my sexuality, having sex with men, lots of older men, and it's kind of working through my daddy issues and also being attracted to a lot of cowboy rough types. So I'm just going to say that and let you guys hear the poem. It's called Dissonance. I want to behold him in nothing but boots and cattlemen, sunburnt skin brine, dirty blonde chest hair reflected in porch light. I want to lap salt off forearms, Chew, scar-decorated shoulders, tongue dead-celled neck. I need to inhale grass and dirt and dirt and dirt. He doesn't need to talk. I don't want to hear about horses and guns and women. I want him to shove me against ranch house stucco, rub hardness into my soft city mind. Our callous knuckles speak a common language, the wilderness, the forgotten metropolis. Now, this next piece is in the final section of my collection, which is kind of where I ruminate and reflect deeply on where I've come and how I've evolved, and how I celebrate my identity today, because this collection is kind of a building German, a coming of age narrative, and me reckoning with all of these things, traumatic or otherwise, from my past. And so this is kind of me realizing that as a non-binary person, I'll probably be forever misgendered even to the day I die. And so I kind of thought about this idea of, somebody eulogizing me and then just inevitably misgendering me using incorrect pronouns. And it's kind of sad, but it's also like, well, at least at the end of the day, I know who I am and I'm leaving my mark for my poems. So there's that. But this poem is kind of coming from that macabre place, but I also don't really see it as a completely macabre poem, if that makes sense. So it's called If They Equals You. When I die, I know they won't call me by my name. They'll use a legal designation with a third person I outgrew. Can I mourn my inevitable erasure? Or rather, don't tell me death is any sweeter. There can't be release if my fascia was never connected to their social organism, a multicellular facade. But I knew that absence is unerasable. Every part of a cell is important, down to the space in between. I should ask, what do I feel when I'm nothing to mourn? When my cells don't contain the interstitial jelly called presence? I can't capitalize my presence if it doesn't exist. He was loved, they'll say. And so that ends the 3 poems that I'm going to read from a collection. And I only read 3 because I've been doing a kind of virtual book tour for this book, and I've been reading so many poems from that book, but I'm like, I want to read my new stuff that's in my upcoming collection. So I'm going to read some poems from that. I get into a lot of pop culture stuff, and I talk more about my mixed race heritage. So that's kind of my brief roadmap moment for you guys. But this first poem is about my love for Darren Criss, which, if you guys don't know, he was in Glee, but he was also in The Assassination of Gianni Versace, and he was in recently Hollywood. And he's somebody that I've always really identified with because he's also mixed race Filipino. Specifically, his mom is from Cebu, which is the part of the Philippines my mom immigrated from. And his dad is German, which that's my European side of my family too. So I feel like there's a lot of connection there. And also he played all of these gay roles on television. And so as a young queer kid myself, I'm like, I'm seen. But it's funny because a few years ago, he was like, I'm not going to play gay roles on TV anymore because I'm straight and I want to give, visibility and awareness to the queer community. And I'm like, that's cool, but you also played gay so well and I loved you for it. But I'm like, you're like the one person where I feel like you can play gay and it's fine. Like you're not taking away from anybody. Please come back and play Blaine from Glee. But this poem is kind of an address to Darren Criss and my relationship to him. Dear Darren Criss, it's a shame you're straight, as in I imagine myself snuggled in Blaine's, your Dalton Academy blazer post-coitus. I would have known you better than Kurt, than yourself. Aren't we the same? A mixed yellow Californian with a dead buried in Cebu. I, too, know San Francisco's Castro district. I've caressed the fog of your Catholic childhood. What's more intimate, I ask? You stole me the moment Katy Perry flew off your tongue. I awoke inside your all-boys paradise. There, your voice warbled into me. Vuela por mis pulmones. No, mi amor, they were always yours. I yearned for you before I learned to want myself, this queer little heart. Your gaze, that's what you left me, a trail of hazel confetti to lead me back to the crossroads of our teenage dream. You married a woman, but I still think of our olive hands intertwined, 2 Pinoy mongrels against them all. I can never forgive you, as in I refuse to stop falling in love with us. Now, this next piece is kind of the thrust of my collection, Mix that I talked about earlier. It's this sequence of reformulated found poems from the Asian Romance Guide to Marriage by Correspondence, which was this guidebook that was part of this catalog service and company called Asian Romance that basically facilitated marriages of American men with Filipinas abroad. And that's how I was actually born. My mom was a picture bride, and my dad and my mom corresponded for a few letters, and a few months later they got married. I moved to California, and here I am. And of course, as you can kind of imagine, there's a whole history of colonialism, fetishization, etc., that is part of my DNA and that I'm trying to reckon with, and which is why I turn to poetry so much. And so I found this document, the Asian Romance Guide to Marriage by Correspondence, which has my late father's notes and all of his like little things about my mom. He has like these wire numbers and these banks and these addresses on there. And so it's interesting seeing the kind of like formulaic and thought and like the thought that went behind the formula and thought that went behind kind of the circumstances of my birth. And this first poem is actually a sample letter that I reformulated from that to kind of encourage nervous American men to write letters to these women in the Philippines. And so this one is the first part of that sequence. And it's called Asian Romance Guide to Marriage by Correspondence. October 20th, 1989, dear Carmelita. What a pleasure it is to write such a lovely young lady, her robe a cloud, her face a flower. My name is American Man. I live in a townhouse on the outskirts of Huntsville, Alabama. I taught high school for 26 years, 7 as vice principal. 66 years old, I live on a very adequate retirement pension. I am in excellent physical shape. I work out 3 times a week, never smoke, seldom drink. The real matter of importance is not a person's age, but the love within his heart. My wife of 35 years died suddenly. I wish to make a fresh start. A simple, light-hearted lady who enjoys adventure. I have a motor home to travel around this grand empire. I believe in faithfulness, gentle lady. I look forward to having your pleasure soon. Sincerely, Clarence. So yeah, I have a sequence of about like 8 poems, and I also have reformulated a lot of the text around these sample letters. And so that's kind of like the main part of this collection I'm working on, which is going to be my dissertation too. I don't know if you guys know Janine Joseph, but I'm so lucky to be able to work with her because she's Filipina and I've never had like a Filipinx professor ever. So it's cool that I get to write about my identity with a professor who actually kind of viscerally gets it. But anyway, this next poem is kind of about the tensions I feel about being mixed race, and then the complicated relationship I have with family back in the Philippines, and then being in America, and then also my relationship with my mom. This is actually a prose poem, and I don't really write prose poems, so I wanted to say that it was a prose poem because it's definitely new territory for me. This is called Balikbayan. Every OF knows this. My mom is no exception. We'd head to the closest LBC, Jollibee around the corner. All branches must be located at strip malls. Maybe California is just a strip mall. I don't remember what we put in those red boxes. I only know we sent rich American money. We paid for my cousin's nursing education. They think we're all rich, Ma always tells me. What we is that? I think it's funny how my mom wants to be American while I want to be a Filipino. She's more we than myself, but I can still check citizen while she still has to renew her green card. In this country, you're only permanent until renewal. I joke that post-colonialism is a bigger word for compromise. Is that melodrama or is it a cry for help? Take a box from my past, tell me I'm enough. I didn't understand my niece when she asked why I wasn't white because she wasn't either. I hate my mom for thinking I am because I have a US passport. A couple of years ago, the day before Ma turned 52, my cousin, the nurse, Facebook messaged me, Danny, your uncle Arturo is dying. She included a photo of him almost dead. Please tell your mom. Ma was upset. Teresa cursed my birthday. Exactly 52 years after my mom was born, her brother died in their native Cebu. I was part of the family that July afternoon. My heart's rhythm inside the Balikbayan box. I have the picture to prove. And then I cut it off with an M dash, by the way. So it didn't just end like that. It was intentional. And now this final poem kind of returns to that slutty theme. And I just wanted to say before I read this, thank you guys so much again. And I'm so honored to read with Kendra and Kalisa tonight. And thank you so much to SAFTA for hosting me, because I often feel like a little baby poet. And so I'm glad to be with folks who I really admire tonight. But this poem is basically about being read as whatever men need to read me as. And I'll just leave it as that. Kumusta po, how are you? Como te va? I can kiss you in 3 tongues, stranger. Let me know how you want it. Like a snake, I swallow whole. I've been called a global citizen, but I prefer exotic. I only sleep with dirty blonde, blue-eyed boys because I can't forget I'm special. I read in a textbook once that Asian American women marry white men, whether deliberately or subconsciously, to assimilate. Lover, I'm thinking of this sociological phenomenon when I tell you I'm more like my mother than my father. I've inherited the girl who wanted to inhale the new world. Have I told you I'm non-binary? Don't worry, it's not gay if you're fucking nothing. Thy salted skin tastes of everything. So I repeat, sir, what language do you need me to be in? Again, thank you so much. Salamat.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Our final reader is Kalisa Ray. She is an award-winning poet and journalist based in Durham, North Carolina. She's the author of Ghost in a Black Girl's Throat, and her essays are featured in Autostraddle, Catapult, LitHub, as well as articles in Bitch Media, NBC, BLK, and others. Her poetry appears in Frontier Poetry, Florida Review, Rust and Moth, Pank, Hellebore, Sundog Lit, Hobart, among countless others. Currently, she serves as assistant editor for Glass Poetry and is co-founder of Think in Ink and the Women of Color Speak reading series. Her second collection, Unlearning Eden, is forthcoming from White Stag Publishing in 2022. Please welcome Kalisa Ray.
Hello, hello. Oh my goodness, y'all are so amazing. Kendra and Danny, y'all just have me gutted. So I'm just like, my heart is like fluttering. But first, thank you so much to SAFTA, everyone that organized, Stacy, Gray, Aaron, Arlen, thank you so much for having me. This is just an honor. I've been a big fan of Sundress for a long time, so this is just an honor and a privilege. I can't wait to come visit y'all. I'm in good spirits, not only because I just found out I'm getting my first house soon, so that's exciting. If you know anything about the housing market going on right now, it's crazy. So I got that news today, so I'm super excited. But I'm secondly excited because I'm here with you promoting my debut poetry collection, Ghost in a Black Girl's Throat, with Red Hem Press. And like Danny, I've been on a book tour, so I'm gonna try to read some fresh poems, because if you've seen me read, I read a lot of the same ones. I'm sure you can understand. It gets kind of monotonous. So I'm gonna read some poems from Ghost in a Black Girl's Throat, but also I'm gonna read some pieces from Unlearning Eden. I will say, Kendra, listening to you, I like brought my cute little like sweet poems, and I was like, oh, I should have brought my raunchy stuff tonight, you know? I should have came with it. But next time I'll be more brave and courageous. We're gonna start with Shrinking Women. To give some context to this piece, I am also a slam poet, and that's where I met my partner, now husband. And I heard, if you know anything about slam, there's a phenomenal poet, her name is Sierra DeMuller. And I heard her talk about the idea of taking up space in the white community as women, and how she felt like she couldn't take up space. And so I wrote a letter to her, actually responding back to taking up space, but through the guise of Alice. And so it's kind of interesting. It's called Shrinking Women. Dear Alice, do you remember squeezing arms and limbs inside small passageways? How the rabbit hole turned you contortionist, shrinking ribcage, shrunken head of a woman? Do you remember collapsing shut, downsizing your dangerous, making minuscule of your mouth? How they told you to be bite-sized, compact crumb meal to be devoured? They gave you the key, told you to enter with small hands, promised you milk and honey on the other side, and you believed them. You consumed their magic potions, fasting on their perceptions of beauty as a means of survival. But we all did. All of us curvaceous and space takers, attending tea parties dressed in self-doubt, scarving down empty calories of continual self-loathing. Each staircase of comparison sending us spiraling, off with their heads, off with the pounds, appearing small to hide our dangerous expansion, winding through tattered mazes of people-pleasing and playing nice, all the while busting at the seams of brilliant. They were hoping we'd shrink so they could commercialize our size, tell us to gain and then lose every inch of who we are. Who we are is not a door, we are the brick house, supporting a satisfying frame, a body well handled with love and stricken thunderous thighs that refuse to stop rippling. I love that poem so much. That's in Unlearning Eden. And that poem really speaks to me coming to love my body fully and wholly. Unlearning Eden is a YA novel in verse, and it's the novel that I wish I could have written for myself as a Black queer femme growing up in a really religious household in Indiana. And I'm sure you can understand how repressive that was, being in Indiana in the Midwest and grappling with my sexuality at that time. I'm gonna transition, I'm gonna bounce back and forth between Unlearning Eden and Ghost in a Black Girl's Throat. So this is from Ghost in a Black Girl's Throat. This is Making Counterfeit Again. One of my mentors is Mahogany Brown. I've got her book behind me. And this is actually after her. She has a lot of poems that just really speak to being loud and proud to be a Black woman and really calling out forms of appropriation and gentrification and just anything that tries to rob us of our culture. And so this is Making Counterfeit Again in the vein of that. This great America be street vendor, peddling our identity like flea market, haggling our genius to passersby, selling hand-me-down inventions and gently used designer genetics. So why you keep stealing our blues and calling it a pop song? Convinces the masses you made our pain a fashion statement, our twerk be copywritten, and you get no royalties from our two-step. Our lingo ain't for sale, so stop plagiarizing our hood speech, mainstreaming our broken English. This America be mass producer of appropriation, factory full of features, ripping our packages open, searching for damaged goods. But this Black be authentic, this Black be original, this melanated music be off the market, this slang be sold out and never returning to shelves, this dialect be discontinued, this Black be too high and out of your reach. I think that that poem is so relevant because if you know anything about what's going on, I'm a journalist too, so I study a lot of what's going on in the news and social justice because I'm also an activist and try to use my journalism and poetry for that. And if you know anything about what's going on in the news, TikTok, a lot of the Black dancers and artists are stopping putting their work online because it's being stolen and appropriated. And so it's just funny how I wrote that so long ago and it's just coming full circle because that topic is in the news a lot now. We're gonna swing back over to Unlearning Eden. And I had the honor and privilege of doing my master's program with the illustrious Claudia Rankin and Ada Limon. And I bring that up only because this next poem I wrote after my class with Ada. I had the privilege of studying abroad my last year with her in Santiago, Chile. And we went to Pablo Neruda's house. And I was really sick when I went. When I was crafting this book, I found out that I had an autoimmune disease and I was deathly sick. And I tried to write poems that made me feel empowered and emboldened at a time that I didn't feel well. And so I went to Pablo Neruda's house, read some of his work, and then wrote this piece. It's called Ode to Uncommon Things. If this world has taught me anything, it has taught me that we are obsessed with naming, with calling a wren, with deciding the weeping willow was heavy with grief, with echoing the words nightjar and picturing a nocturnal hawk. Maybe it's the godlike power of it all. The villain of conjuring titles, calling a thing broken and watching it fall, then calling it chosen and turning to phoenix, watching it rise, a glorious thing. But who are we to be cataloged and filed? All of us just common things waiting to be named uncommon, waiting to go from bird to nightingale, from pigeon to white-winged, crestback, long-tailed widow. The sonnet we hoped would be written for our razor-backed in color stripes, unwritten. Instead, we watched while handkerchief and pitch pipe got 83. Mementos to things less miracle than we. Time spent crafting sestinas to shoes, penny loafers, and pocket watches, but we are not listed among them. And why? We, the uncommon, silvery tokens that we are. I love that poem because it just made me feel better about being sick at a time when I needed to be, churning out poems in my master's classes. And it just gave, for some reason, that poem gave me grace, allowed me to give more grace to myself, and made me feel more empowered. This is a new piece that's going to be in Unlearning Eden. It's called Destroying Charlotte's Web. And I am arachnophobic. I am so scared of spiders, but a lot of these poems I'm realizing are dedication pieces. So Nikki Giovanni has a poem about spiders, but she uses it, as you know anything about it, it's about the Black widow and how that's a metaphor for the killing of innocent Black people and how we just smack what we're afraid of. And so I read that poem and was so inspired by it. I talked about my own arachnophobia. Destroying Charlotte's Web. I say I am afraid of spiders, but secretly I am jealous of all the ways life has given them 8 exits. The choice to get gone and stay gone. How escape is the best revenge. My legs have been dying to flee through the cracks unannounced, how spiders are spirits and their legs have many lives. All to say something about the web they've stitched, the many mills they lattice with their abundant hands, thread and tie up the threat for later. They're all the same. Wasps and bees, things with wings and multiple escape plans, damn the freedom to burrow into the floorboard and leap out the window. Stuck, I scream and swat their flight, eliminate their choices, the shoe, the zapper, the newspaper, the revolver, it's all the same makeshift control. How spiders are spirits and their legs have many lives, how it has what it needs to leave, live, and uses it. And I am emerald-eyed and foaming that I can't trap that. I've never read that poem out loud before. So thank you so much for allowing me, as I wrap up, to read a new piece that's going to be in my collection. We're bouncing as we close back over to Ghost in a Black Girl's Throat. This is Into the Woods. I'm going to end on this note and read you a quote from something before I close out. But I love this poem too, because this was a poem that I took and stitched during my master's program when I was like, you know what? I've had some heartbreak recently, and I'm gonna just like empower myself through this poem. Into the woods. I must have wandered into the woods, open palm, stitches gushing, my 20-year-old something wounds advertising there is broken here. All my scar tissue, a magnet for men obsessed with mending, boys that respond to women's cries like an invitation to console and fill me with delusions of grandeur. I was the project of wannabe martyrs that bore the cross of a thief, saviors that got drunk off the wine of women's wailing vulnerability, collecting tears like notches, sonic ears tuned to only the pitch of damsels in distress. Because what's a hero without the conquest and crumbling? In this script, he is the lifeguard and I, the drowning thing he comes running to on speed to tower window in hopes of being declared a knight, when most knights are dogs in wolf's clothing and most dogs are desperate searching for scraps. The test is how fast he arrives at the scene of the burning building, how quickly he pries the claws from around the neck of the Red Riding Woman. What he doesn't know is I store knives in the pocket of my bruised and fractured frame, train in the skill of bullshit daggers, perfect my archery for he who thinks my body is made of straw. And all my mouths have compasses, my hearts have bows and arrows, and I use Prince Charming's cheating ass for target practice. Thank y'all again so very much for having me, for allowing me to share space with you. I would be remiss if I didn't end on this quote. I don't know why I wanted to, but I have a piece called Catching Bees for the Broken, and something that Danny read just put me in the mind of this, and so I just want to offer this back. Today, I am putting my plans on hold and mining the honey bubbling under my lips, scraping what's left and molding a balm for days I want to feel whole. Thank y'all so much again for having me.
Thank you, Kalisa. More great work. Everybody's just crushing it tonight. All right, we have a few minutes left. If you have any questions for tonight's readers, feel free to pop those in the chat. We've got about 8 minutes left, so we can have a little conversation here before we close out the evening, if y'all are up for it. While we're waiting for questions, I'd like to remind you that our June community partner is Knoxville Black Mamas Bailout, and we have information in the chat where you can donate to help them out. So please do consider doing that. Any questions from our audience or readers? Do you have any questions for each other? Well, I have a question for Danny about the letters that you said from the handbook for, I forgot what it was called. So the letters that you reformulated were actual letters that your father wrote, or they were like sample letters from the book?
Yeah, they were sample letters that had been republished with permission from quote unquote successful, like, what would you even call that? Like successful people in successful marriages, like from white men in successful marriages because of the service. So they included those sample letters to kind of encourage like would-be like grooms to like, you know, use their service. But yeah, I wish I kind of had my dad's letters, because that would be really interesting to reformulate, but I don't. I mean, I did actually find, because I find lots of random stuff like in storage and stuff, because he's passed away. Well, I was gonna say he's been dead, but then I felt kind of harsh, but I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna say he's been dead for like 5-6 years. And I recently found like his old, what was it? Like, what's that thing that little boys often do? It's on the tip of my tongue, like Boy Scouts. I found this old Boy Scout like uniform, and it was like super small. I'm like, oh, my dad was like a little kid at one point, and I feel like I have to write a poem about that. But yeah, I've been working through a lot of this like kind of stuff that's in his estate. I mean, maybe one day I'll find some of his like letters, or maybe my mom has some of his letters. But yeah, it would be really interesting to see what he actually wrote.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for telling us about that process. Any other questions? If not, I'll go ahead and wrap up. I want to tell you about some upcoming activities and events we have. On Wednesday, July 7th, from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. You can join us for Queering Ekphrasis, a workshop led by Marina Carrera. And that is going to be a generative workshop asking poets to look at works by contemporary LGBTQ+ artists and compose ekphrastic poetry in response to the work, all while considering what makes the art queer and exploring the ways it captures the queer experience. So you can learn more about that on our Facebook page. And also check out our Facebook for information about our July installment of the reading series. That will be on Wednesday, July 28th at 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock Eastern Time. And our readers will be Erin Casido Kimura, Julie Danho, and Alexa Doran. So we hope to see you back here on Zoom for that. And until then, everybody take care. Thanks for sharing your reading with us, wonderful readers. Audience, thank you for joining us. And everybody take care. Bye-bye.